give it up for Mr. George Takei.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Isn't it wonderful to be liberated after 18 months at home? Here we are at the national capital as well. We've come from all over, and there's a nice, comfortable-looking chair. Whoops. I'm going to make myself comfortable, as I'm sure you are now. I am so wonderfully liberated in feeling because we really were in quarantine. We stayed home, everything was delivered to us, and the only time we went out was for our 45-minute walk in the neighborhood for our exercise. But we didn't go out at all because of technology, this thing called Zoom. And the wonderful thing about that was, if I went to a regular board meeting, I got dressed up to here, up, and my pajama pants were on below me. It was a wonderful quarantine, I thought, but it does get to be a little too confining. And it's wonderful to be back and hear the sounds that you make as a massive collective, a collective called an audience. Yes, you guys sound beautiful to me. And you've all come out of quarantine, so you are liberated here. But the thing is, it's starting to surge again with this new Delta variation. So we've got to be careful. We've got to be masked. And I hope you're all vaccinated. Yay! Absolutely. There are some, we know what it's like to do away with a pandemic. I mean, you know, a few centuries ago, we had the Black Plague, and superstitious people burnt old ladies because they sounded strange. They tied old ladies to the stake and burned her. And we still seem to have these superstitious people who say vaccination is something that they won't do. I mean, these anti-vaxxers are crazy. And we have some governors that are morons. Yeah. Politicians like to, impress people, move people, inspire people. But there are some governors that feel nothing about making public spectacles of themselves as fools, as idiots, as absolute morons. Tell them. We will prevail. We who believe in science, not superstition. And so it's wonderful to be liberated. When I had this convention in Washington, I said, let's arrive 2 days early and enjoy this wonderful capital of ours, the capital of our culture as well, and these wonderful museums. And so, and I have just made a debut at the National Portrait Gallery. I am hanging there in the civil rights section because I've been involved in a lot of civil rights movement. So all of you go out and visit the National Portrait Gallery, which isn't too far from the convention center, and say hello to me. I won't move. I hope it'll move you. And we also went to the International Spy Museum. That's a fun museum, isn't it? They asked me to do a video for them because there is a spy connection to me. When I was a 5-year-old, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And simply because we looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans, American citizens of Japanese ancestry, were looked at as the enemy. We weren't the enemy, but the government categorized Japanese Americans as enemy aliens. We were neither. My mother was born in Sacramento. My father was a San Franciscan. My brother and sister and I were born in Los Angeles, California. We're Americans, and we were not the enemy. But just like in the pandemic, people went crazy, insane, illogical things. They attacked elderly Asian Americans with violence. They were knocked down on the sidewalk. One of them fell on the sidewalk so hard he got a concussion, which eventually killed him. Or other women were attacked and beaten all over this country because they're Asian. I mean, how savage can Americans be? And there was one crazy kid that went around in Atlanta, Georgia, shooting up Asian women. I mean, this today, but 80 years ago, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, that happened to us. And as a 5-year-old child, I was put in a barbed wire prison camp. Barbed wire fences, tall sentry towers, machine guns pointed at us. And it was an insane time. People were accused of something that we were not. And ultimately, some people said, all right, you're going to keep calling us the enemy? By gum, we'll show you what kind of enemy we can be. They became radicalized. The government made them radicals. And a series of turbulent things happened then. So back in '94, I wrote an autobiography called To the Stars, looking to the future, and also about Star Trek. And that came out. But still, there are people in America today, people that I can consider well-informed, well-read, intelligent people, that still don't know about that chapter of American history in which innocent American citizens of Japanese ancestry were put in prison camps. So I said to myself, I want to reach young people because they're going to be the voters of the future. And I want them to know that we are capable as a nation to do something like this. So I wrote a graphic memoir because when I was a preteen to teen, I loved comic books. Yay, comic books. But now we use this fancy name, graphic novels, or in my case, memoir, because it's my memory. And so I published a comic book about my childhood imprisonment called They Called Us Enemy, because that's what they called us. And there is talk now that they're interested in making a television series out of my book. They called us enemy. And some of you have already picked it up at my table, and those of you who have not, do come by and get a copy. And this is the, what we had at our table is the expanded version. They're more my family pictures when I was a little kid. from a baby to 5 years old. There's only one picture of me in camp because cameras weren't allowed. But my parents got one picture of me, and so we have that in the book as well. So do pick up your copy of the expanded book, which has a sunset scene on the cover. And so there are a lot of things that I'm looking forward to. I did the voice on Mel Brooks' comedy. How many of you saw Blazing Saddles?
Yeah!
Well, he's made another Blazing movie. This one, a animated movie. It's about, well, the title is Blazing Samurai. Just the combination of that, the word blazing and samurai is a ridiculous combination. But in this story, all the characters are cats. But there is one character who is not a cat, the hero. He's a dog. And the dog is the samurai, and a powerful samurai. But he doesn't know the cat culture. And this village of poverty-stricken cats is in danger because there is a bandit group of cats that annually, every year, comes and raids the village and robs from them. And they want protection. And the best samurai in all of catdom is this cat, the cat samurai. So, but you know how dogs and cats get along. So there's that comedy element too. And I play a cat general, a samurai general, a lord who wears the samurai armor with the helmet and all. And they thought my voice sounded like a general's voice, and so I do that. But I have a lord that I work for who's a tiny cat. But you know, these tiny cats are the ones that are always the bossy, the regal, the know-it-all. And that tiny lord cat is given voice by, my mind's blanking out. Brad, what's the name of the... Ricky Gervais just came to me. Ricky Gervais. So high-pitched Ricky Gervais is my boss. But this general has subtle ways to control him as well. So watch for Blazing Samurais coming out in a few months. And They Called Us Enemy as a television series when it comes. That's going to be a little ways down the road because we're developing the script for that. So with that update, I see people lined up at both aisles. And when I first do something, I go left. You're my left, although your audience right. So let's begin with you.
All right, thank you for coming, Mr. Takei. I was just wondering, I went and saw William Shatner yesterday, and it was a real treat, definitely an experience I will never forget. And I'm sure a lot of us would have really liked it if the two of you could have appeared on a panel together this year. And
is he still here?
Yeah.
Yes, no?
I don't think so, no. Don't,
He's not.
You're safe, you're safe. So I was just wondering, what did he ever do to you that he is so terrible and you can't stand to be in a room with him? I mean, given your history, we've been through a lot, clearly, so it must have been something really horrible. So I was just wondering what that might be.
Read to the stars. You are illiterate. You have not read To the Stars, have you?
No.
Read it.
Okay.
Your question is answered there.
All right. Thank you.
But he is, he's a charming guy, witty guy, and he's the quintessential Captain Kirk. I mean, no one could have done Captain Kirk as well as Bill did. He brought his own arrogance and confidence. But to get the detail, I could go on all afternoon long. But with the book, you'll have your question answered. Enough?
Enough.
That
Thank
from
you.
the left side. Now what you right-wingers are up to.
Hey! Well, welcome to D.C., and thank you for all of your contributions to the civil rights movement. You should be proud of
Absolutely.
yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My question is, take me back to when you first started doing Star Trek. Did you have any idea that it would take off the way it has, and then here we are some 50 years later, it's still just as popular, well, if not more popular, than it was back in the day? Give me your thoughts on that, please.
Well, because I have good judgment and an understanding of good writing and appreciation for other good actors, and Gene Roddenberry was a visionary, and I thought he had a fantastic vision of our future. I said, every time I fall in love with a show, my favorite shows that have these qualities, wonderful acting, good writing, good directing, and a good philosophy about life, they last only one season. So as a matter of fact, Jimmy Doohan asked me that same question when we were filming the pilot. And I said, I think we're going to be very proud of our association with this show. It's got all those things, quality in the writing, acting, directing, and Gene Roddenberry's vision. And so I know I'm going to be very proud of my association with this. But it'll be canceled after the first season. How wrong I was. But ultimately, how right I was, because our ratings were low the first season. And the second season was low as well. And NBC was starting to talk about canceling us after the second season. But the secret weapon that Star Trek had was all of you, fans. Don't clap for yourselves. Many of you weren't around then. I think all of you, not all of you, but most of you were born after we were canceled. You're post-cancellation. The fans we had then, after the first season and the second season, were people of high quality. But they were also determined and relentless and activists. They didn't just sit back and absorb in entertainment. They stood up, organized, and said, we're going to do something about it. And they launched a letter writing campaign. And in those days, we did write letters with pen in hand on paper. We folded it up, put it in an envelope, pasted a stamp on it, and sent it off to NBC or the studios. And that campaign nationwide was spearheaded by a woman named Bijo Trimble. Let's give Bijo a hand, because She was terrific. She did an amazing job of galvanizing all the Star Trek fans, the ones that we had. And they wrote and rewrote, and they just multiplied themselves. And NBC was so impressed, not only by the number of letters, but the quality of those letters. Very intelligent, very thoughtful, very polite and gracious. And so they said, let's give it another third season. But the ratings still remained low. And so they had the numbers to justify cancellation, and we were canceled. But after we were canceled, the networks put it into syndication, and the price for us was very low because we were low rated for 3 seasons and then canceled. So the syndicators said, oh, it's cheap. Let's not do it just one night a week. Let's do it 5 nights a week, from Monday until Friday. And that continuous access to Star Trek found our audience, and that's when the ratings soared. But it was after we were all canceled, so they couldn't revive it. They made some efforts to revive it, but it was hopeless. They just couldn't arrange the schedules. And so it was going to remain a 5-night-a-week rerun series. But in 1978, I think it was, Star Wars opened, 77, Star Wars opened, and that exploded at the box office. And the powers that be at Paramount said, look at all that money that 20th is making. We've got a science fiction project in our closet here. Why don't we pull that out and compete with Star Wars with Star Trek? And they decided to make it as a feature film. And 10 years after we were canceled, in 1979, we came back as a major feature film directed by one of the top directors in Hollywood, Robert Wise. And Star Trek, the motion picture, opened, and it just exploded. It was a huge audience, and many of you were around then. And we had the premiere for Star Trek, the motion picture, right here in Washington, D.C. And we had the premiere party at the Air and Space Museum. It was definitely a Washington, D.C. opening that we had. So, and since then, we've become not only a series of feature films, but we began reproducing like tribbles. We began having spin-off shows. We call them our children. And the next generation happened, and the next generation happened, and the next, and so we've had so many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We feel like great-great-great-grandparents now. But we love our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren. So Gene Roddenberry's legacy will live long and prosper. Let's go left again.
First, sir, I just wanted to say thank you because I was living in Roanoke, Virginia when our mayor made those horribly disparaging comments, and you came and it meant the world to us. So thank you so much for that. And secondly, this is the 35th anniversary of the voyage home this week, and some of us, I hope, got to see it in the theater. That was the movie for my brother and I that we watched every Friday on a really wibbly VHS copy, So for you, when somebody brings up the voyage home, what's the first memory of filming that comes to mind?
Well, when you start me on all the other productions, you know, I am reminded in just a couple of weeks, Star Trek will be 55 years old. September 8th is the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. So we've had many, many generations. We're 55 years old, and dear Gene Roddenberry, he's the one whose vision this is, and we are all the beneficiary of that. Gene would have been 100 years old just a few weeks back. I can't remember the date, but we celebrate, or is it's in August sometime, that Gene would have turned 100 years old. He was born in El Paso, Texas, 100 years ago. Some Texan back there? Did I hear a Texan whoop? And let's give it for El Paso, Texas, Gene Roddenberry's birthplace. So your question was, what do I think about when you mentioned Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home? We filmed that on location in San Francisco, and that was my father's hometown. And so I, when it was in the writing stage, I suggested to the writer, why don't we make San Francisco Sulu's birthplace and give him the line, San Francisco, I was born there. How many of you remember that line? I'm not George Takei is not a San Franciscan. I was born in Los Angeles, and I love my hometown. But I love my father's hometown as well. And so I have two hometowns that I can claim and share it with the character that I'm best known for. Sulu was born in San Francisco. So that's what I think about. We filmed on location there, which was wonderful because it's a place of good eating, lots of good seafood. I love seafood, as is true of Washington, D.C. Great seafood here. And in that waterfront area is I can't remember the name of it, but a great seafood restaurant there. So Star Trek IV brings back many, many fond memories, but also one not too happy memory, because I think it was, I forget whose idea it was, what writer, but it was a charming idea. Walking down the streets of San Francisco, Sulu sees a cute Asian boy, and he has a brief conversation with him, and he discovers that this Asian boy is his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather to be, because we flash back in time from the 23rd century to the 20th century. And it was an absolutely charming, delightful scene. And Leonard Nimoy was directing it. He flew up to San Francisco and interviewed cute little Japanese boys, and he selected one. That was in a very comfortable, quiet, controlled office where he met with the children. And the one he selected was adorable. Then when we were ready to film that, we were filming in Hollywood, and we came on up to San Francisco on location, and that child was gotten up very early in the morning. People think film acting is glamorous. No, it is not glamorous when you're getting up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning and getting to the studio or to the location site, going into makeup and grabbing a quick breakfast and you're before the cameras. Well, they did that to that poor child as well. The child was brought, I think he lived across the bay from San Francisco on East Bay, and he was brought to makeup, made up, and he saw all these lights and equipment being rolled about. And when we got ready to film that scene, he just froze up. He was the cutest boy, but he was not used to being an actor. And so you should have seen Leonard, who was dressed in that monk-like outfit. He and I were squatting down to that little boy's height and cajoling him, and Leonard would say, "This is Uncle Sulu. Wouldn't you like to play a scene with him?" And I would hunker down and say, "You're my great-great-great-great-grandfather." And the kid would just stare at me like this. What does he mean calling me somebody's great-great-great-great-grandfather? He's a big man. The kid was, I felt terribly because the kid was so, and he absolutely refused to do anything that we wanted him to do. And then the sun went down. We spent a good afternoon pleading and begging, and we could not afford to get there again. So we had to do without that scene. So that's the unhappy memory I have of Star Trek IV. But in its entirety, I have many layers of wonderful memories.
Thank you so much for sharing.
And right on the button, I've hit my get off the stage mark right there. So thank you all very much for all the support you've been giving us. We love you. We've been in love with you for 55 years. Those of you who were born after we were canceled, you are wonderful. Star Trek will live on, and may you all live long and prosper.
Awesome Con, make some noise for George Takei.
Hi, this is Michael Shanks, and you're watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The fate of the universe may depend on it. And have fun and follow your fandom.